tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit.
There's a big appeal that's hit him on the pad. He's out. Lions gone. New South Wales are 9 down. Onto Sydney Road, and it's hit a car. Oh, I think it's hit a car. What a way to bring up your 50.
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Menners, and we have so much to talk about this week. The IPL was stopped, and now it's starting again. There's been a massive retirement in the world of cricket. Australia have named their World Test Championship squad, and there's been some exciting local news with the Sydney Sixers signing a massive coach for their WBBL team. Joining me to go through it all, like the IPL, you just can't keep this guy down. Damien Watson, welcome back. How are you?
Great to be with you, Menners. I tell you what, traditionally this has been a quiet time of the year for cricket, but I don't know what to unpack first. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Just so many layers to unpack.
Yeah, lots to talk about. So listeners to the show will know I did an emergency episode on Saturday with Chandresh Narayanan from Mumbai, and we talked about Sharma's retirement, we talked about the IPL stopping, and we talked about rumours around Virat Kohli retiring from Test cricket. Well, since then, those rumours have been confirmed, and he has announced his retirement. You'd have to be living on Mars not to know that, that's for sure. But with the IPL, so Chandresh said on Saturday night that the IPL will be determined to be finished in India. And, what's really clear to me is the IPL is a source of national pride in India, and they don't want to feel like they can't complete it because of what's happened with Pakistan. So I think it's sort of wrapped up in their national pride that they feel like they have to get this done. So the facts are the IPL is going to restart this Saturday, the 17th. The final is now 4th of June. Interestingly, the Pakistan Super League is starting this Saturday as well, and that finishes a week later. So that finishes on the 25th of May. But I guess the key thing here is now that the IPL is finishing on the 4th of June, that does put into disarray the preparations for the World Test Championship final. 8 players in the South African 15-player squad are due to be playing in the IPL till the 4th of June. They've only been given permission till the 25th of May to be in the IPL. So they'll have to sort that out between South Africa and the BCCI. And then, of course, you've got the England players you've got the England players who aren't going back because of their summer. And then you've got the Australian players who there aren't too many affected, actually, both from the World Test Championship squad. There's Josh Inglis, who's with the Punjab Kings, but Josh Hazlewood is not going back to RCB. Rumours Mitchell Starc is not going back to the Delhi Capitals. But look, Damien, I guess firstly, this is a big spanner in the works for both South Africa and Australia heading into World Test Championship final.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of the turnaround and everything like that, it is probably, as you said, not as many are affected from an Australian point of view. And the fact that we haven't seen too many Australians, as we've spoken about in recent weeks, Menners, really make a huge impact in the IPL. Does it have a massive effect on the competition? I don't know necessarily. I think the fact that the World Test Championship final is up for grabs, maybe national pride will take precedence in this particular situation, Menners, given what's on the line there. So,
well,
I don't know.
With that, South Africa, I mean, this is a huge opportunity for them to win the World Test Championship final. They won't want. They might never make it again. The way cricket is going. So they won't want 8 of their players playing in the IPL until a week before the first ball, potentially.
I'm just thinking, it's a turnaround time, and I suppose I'm probably talking semantics a little bit, but if you had to, I mean, we've seen players, have to travel overseas at the last minute to join a squad and sometimes even play in the past at very, very short notice. If you're really keyed up for it, does it really make a huge difference? Obviously, there's a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of conditioning, in terms of getting your body right and the sleeping patterns right in certain instances as well if it's a different time zone. But if you're really keyed up for it, would it make a huge difference if you had to fly back very, very quickly?
Well, I think, for example, say Josh Inglis, he's with the Punjab Kings. Say they were to make the final. I don't think it's a big deal for a batter like him to, say, go from the
Yeah.
IPL final across to London and play a week later. But then I guess, as I said before about South Africa, they've got 8 players affected. They wouldn't want to be in a situation where, say, they get held up in the final and then they look back and go, oh, our players were a bit underdone because they'd been on the IPL. I think if it was just a normal test match or a normal test series, you're probably less worried about it. Because it is a grand final, I think if I'm South Africa, I would be uneasy with 8 of my players coming in so late. If it was Australia with just Josh Inglis, you can go, well, I think he'll be okay. He's pretty adaptable.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing. Of the Australians, Jake Fraser-McGurk already said he's not going back to the IPL. As I said, rumours Mitchell Starc won't go back. Josh Hazelwood had an injury, and I think that's probably not a convenient excuse, but it ties in nicely with the injury hanging over him not to have to go back. There's reports that Cummins and Head are going to go back and finish off the IPL, even though the Sunrisers are out of the competition. And I guess a few things are at play here, Damien. So I've done a lot of soul searching about what happened with the IPL, and it's unequivocal. It was a mistake of them to go ahead with that game in Dharamsala last Thursday night. They're 100 kilometers from the Pakistan border. They'd already cancelled a game at the same ground 2 days later. It was just pure greed and stupidity to go ahead with that game last Thursday night. And in the end, the lights went out because of a bomb scare. That's literally why the lights went out. They were worried that the ground would be a target for missiles or a drone attack. So if you're in that situation, you've done something wrong. The players and the crowd should never have been put in that situation for a cricket match. I know it's complicated. I know it's not easy. I have a lot of sympathy for the people making these decisions because things move very, very quickly. But in the end, I think it comes down to a dollars and cents thing. As I've said before, each game is worth, you're talking 20 million US as a cost. That's what the broadcasters pay for the game. But then you got to think about what the advertisers are paying the broadcasters. So each game could be worth between 50 and $100 million. And so for them to move it or pull it off is difficult, but it's left a poor taste in the mouth, I think, of a lot of people that were there. And Mitchell Starc was one of those players at that ground. And I think, he's one player that's been quite affected by, being shepherded out in the dark into buses and driven away. And, you have to imagine what you'd be thinking there, that, God, what if a missile or a drone attack does happen and we're caught in the middle of it?
And it's a prime target, isn't it, Metas? I mean, when you think of big events which attract a lot of people in India, the IPL's a prime target. So I think you're right in the respect that, you got to be risk averse in these situations. And yes, there's a lot of money on the line, but what if there was a drone attack or some form of attack where people are injured or killed? Imagine the cost there, not only of life, but there's financial costs associated with that as well, Metas. And what was the situation too? I read a little bit into it in regards to some of the cricketers leaving, the foreign cricketers leaving, and then wasn't there a strike 2 hours later at the same airbase in which they left? I mean, you'd be thinking, geez, if you're one of those players, be a bit of a shiver down your spine.
Absolutely. I think that was the Pakistan Super League players, and Crash Craddock from News Limited has reported on this, that they left the base and then found out not long after they left the base it was struck by missiles. So they literally left a war zone. That's basically what they did. And I think you had players like Max Bryant and the other Pakistan Super League players over there. And I think David Warner's going to go back to the Pakistan Super League. I think some players will go back because It's interesting here, Damien. We talk about, you say, weighing up the financial stuff and, whether you want to put yourself in that situation. Well, you have to think now that the IPL and the PSL are going to go out of their way to make sure they play in grounds away from the action that aren't going to be affected, you would hope, unless there was, major outbreak of hostilities, which touch wood doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So if you go back, if you're a foreign player and you go back, imagine how favorably those teams are going to look on you. Like Sunrisers will be like, Pat Cummins came back. He didn't need to. Travis Head came back. He didn't need to. And so that could engender a lot, loyalty and value because you're saying to someone that's, really committed to the cause.
Maybe so, but when there's money on the line and the level of money here, Menners, I think performance reigns supreme in these situations, doesn't it? I mean, there's loyalty, but I think it can also be a pretty ruthless.
But in the IPL, if you're seen as someone that's not committed, that cuts and runs, then they will just never sign you again. Like they will just go.
I think in this situation, surely they have some form of sympathy here. I mean, it's a long way to come in itself. I know they get paid a lot of money, but when safety is compromised in the way that it is, I'd like to think that those organisers would be thinking, well, this is an extenuating circumstances, a unique situation. Surely you can have some form of sympathy and you don't look, in a frowned way upon players who decide not to come back, particularly at this stage of the competition.
I think there was some backlash towards Kane Richardson and Adam Zampa when they just got up and left the IPL during COVID. So if they're not going to be sympathetic then, I can't imagine them being that sympathetic now.
I think it's silly. That's just my opinion. People might have a go at me there, but at the end of the day, there are things greater than cricket and greater than sport when it comes to life in these situations.
Yeah, 100%. But then if I'm an IPL owner and I think this guy's not 100% committed, I'm going to spend that money on another player. That's just business.
That's ego.
Business. Yeah, maybe. So mistake to play at Dharamsala last Thursday. Then the competition was basically put on pause the next day. The Pakistan Super League had intended to move and finish in the UAE, but that was blocked by the BCCI. I don't know exactly how they blocked it, but they probably are pretty good customers of the UAE for whatever stuff. I don't know what. But, hiring grounds, there must be some value there. There must be some leverage BCCI could use to say, no, we don't want the PSL being finished there. So the PSL was blocked from being in the UAE. But now it seemed like it was, and I don't know the geopolitics, but it was a tragic flashpoint where lots of people lost their lives. But it seems like things have cooled down. And unfortunately, this is the way of these sort of political tensions, Australia. And I do think this plays into it, that we are so fortunate in this country to be in Ireland, be so far away from everything, that it's hard for us to understand. It's like, say New Zealand was not across the Tasman, but, on our border, and they had guns pointed at us the whole time. And, that's what it would be like. Instead of just winning the Bledisloe Cup all the time, actually really didn't like this. So I don't think Australians are used to that, but I think it's obviously it's settled down a little bit now, and they're going to finish both competitions. And as I said, you can really see where cricket has been wrapped up in the politics and the optics and the propaganda war of both countries not wanting to take a backward step, and that even involving their T20 competitions. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, yeah, but as we've seen over the years, sport, whether I think it's overrated a little bit, even though I'm a massive sports fan, but sport is a microcosm of society. We saw how important it was with rugby union and the Springboks with South Africa getting through their struggles in the 1990s. It's very symbolic, and it's the most patriotic thing India, you could argue, and Pakistan have. So I can understand it from that point of view, that it's used as a bit of a vehicle for national morale. I think it's just human nature in that situation.
Yes, and morale, and also I think one-upmanship, that neither of them want to take a backward step. The IPL is going to keep going. You can't keep us down. And the PSLs, no, we're going to get going again too. You can't keep our competition down.
Well, is it the American? So I don't understand the geopolitics of it, but did the Americans step in and help draw out a ceasefire? Is that what's happened?
To be honest, I've been more concerned with the cricket
Of
ramifications.
course.
No, but I did hear Trump was trying to take credit for brokering the peace, but I also heard
Right.
that wasn't true. But I'm
Well,
very glad things have settled down a little bit, and I think the situation is incredibly sad between these two countries. And
well,
as always, things boil down to conflicts over land and religion, and these things are so deeply ensconced in these people's hearts and minds, you just can't get past it. And it's so sad because when you step back, you, India and Pakistan should have at least a cricket relationship, but they can't even have that. It's very sad.
mm.
And, we're going to talk about Virat Kohli soon. But, one thing that stood out to me was he never played a test against Pakistan.
I know, and that's ironic, isn't it? Given arguably one of the great moments of his career was against Pakistan in the T20 format matters. So, it's kind of sad in a way, I think. Can you imagine, given how big he is in the subcontinent, and I think his influence transcends just India, doesn't it? I think it transcends a lot of those subcontinental countries that love their cricket. Just imagine, how he could have thrived, as we saw on a few occasions with Tendulkar against Pakistan. When he did get the chance to play against the Pakistanis, and how, having some of those big names enhances the rivalry. It is a bit sad that they can't play against one another more often, but I suppose it's just the reality. I don't know whether it's going to change. It's interesting, isn't it? I was thinking it's been a while. Like, there's always been tension and friction, and I don't know if that's ever going to dissipate between the two countries, but it's been a while since it's escalated like this. I think we had the discussion last time we were on that when there was probably the last big increase in tension. It was in the early 70s when a number of Indian and Pakistan players were together in a World 11 or rest of the World 11 match at the MCG against Australia, and they actually bonded together. And it was a very touching moment in the dressing room. So, yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how unfortunately, even after all this time, things just don't change.
Yeah, and it seems like aspirations of them playing cricket together are just
Yeah.
dreams at the moment. Just
Well, we were
happy they're not,
thinking of that, weren't we?
just
We
happy
were
they're not
discussing.
firing. Yeah, happy they're not firing missiles at each other.
Yeah, sad.
Yeah. So just the last thing. So this not dispute, but these discussions between Cricket South Africa and the BCCI around these 8 players involved in the IPL, I can only imagine that the BCCI is going to win this negotiation. I can only imagine that the 8 players will be available for the finals of the IPL. India will want them there. I mean, there's some big players here. There's Rabada, Ngidi, Stubbs, Markram, Mulder, Jansen, Rickleton, Bosch. So there's some big players there. But I guess, some of them will be eliminated before the end of the tournament. So not all of them would be there, right to the end on 4th of June. But I have just a feeling, the way these things work, that the BCCI will somehow convince Cricket South Africa to extend that permission slip.
I think so too. How much influence, Menners, you probably know about this more than me, how much influence does a player's own value of choice come into it here? Because, look, I know money talks and things like that, but there might be a semblance, given this is a rarity for South Africa to be competing at a World Test Championship final. Is there a chance that they take matters into their own hands and go if they want to go? Freedom of choice.
I'm sure maybe the players from the South African players could say, look, we want to be there preparing for the World Test Championship final. And we talked about the potential ramifications. Maybe that IPL club says, well, we're never going to have you play for us again. But if Cricket South Africa don't extend the no objection certificate, then they just can't stay at the IPL, regardless of what they want to do.
Right. It's a bit of a shame, really. I think it should be up to the player in essence, but yeah, as you know, that there's greater powers at play.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all happening in India at the moment. Go back and listen to the interview with Chandrash from Saturday night. He was ahead of the game there. He really did sum up the way India feels about cricket. You could just tell the pride. And yeah, really nice of him to jump on at the last minute. All right, we're going to take our quick break, and then we'll be back to talk about the career of Virat Kohli and who will open the batting for Australia in the World Test Championship final. You are listening to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Menners. I'm with Damien Watson. And Damien, so as if the IPL being postponed, as if Rohit Sharma retiring wasn't enough, Virat Kohli confirmed the rumours. He has retired from Test cricket. And Chandresh Narayanan, who we had on, has Kohli in his top 4 Indian Test batters. Tendulkar, Kohli, Dravid, and Gavaskar is his top 4. And what an incredible record Virat had at Test level: 123 tests, an average of 46.85, 30 hundreds, 31 50s. In Australia, this is interesting. In Australia, he made 700s and averaged 46.73. So, that really shows that we saw the best of him when he was here, Damien. And I think, Virat left a pretty big impression on Australian crowds over the last 15 years.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. One of the greatest of all time. I saw a lot of comparisons made upon hearing the announcement as well. And it's interesting, isn't it? Not only his record on the field, Menners, but we look about the way he's transcended cricket off the field. I mean, he's probably, I don't know, would you argue that at his peak, he's the biggest celebrity in India? I mean, he's got the, the celebrity relation. He was like the Posh and Becks of India, wasn't it, with his relationship, the impact that he had, the level of worship he had. I don't know if it's at the same level of Tendulkar, but maybe I'm talking from a rose-coloured glasses type point of view, given Tendulkar was a key figure in my childhood in terms of watching him, and that's always grandiose in that sort of situation because, figures in sport are always bigger when you're younger. But, I mean, there's no doubt when you think about the reach and influence of a sports person, and cricket at the end of the day is the second biggest sport in the world in terms of the amount of following it has by population behind soccer. I mean, in the last 10 years, I can't think of a bigger figure in cricket in terms of who has performed on the field.
Oh, 100% agree with you. And I think, Tendulkar was bigger than Gavaskar and Kohli was bigger than Tendulkar. I mean, we live in such a digital age now. Obviously, the real prevalence of white ball cricket, especially T20 cricket, and Kohli being such a strong exponent of all of them. I mean, he hasn't retired from one-day cricket, but he's made 51 ODI centuries. Just such a behemoth at international level. So I think he has surpassed Tendulkar in terms of that sort of
really
cult following. But I think that's not. I don't think people would say Kohli was a better batter than Tendulkar.
Right.
But I just think because we're in a digital age with social media and India's touring all the time and they're actually winning stuff. I mean, Kohli was like a god to this generation. So, so, in Australia, 700s averaged 46.73. I think where you see some sort of holes in his record, I'm just going to pick a few holes in his record. So, Indian listeners, you might just want to switch off now for a little while. So, in England, he struggled there. So, he had one very good tour. I think that was about, when was that? I think that was about 20. Anyway, he had a really good tour of England, but apart from that, he struggled. So he averaged 33 in England with just 200s. Obviously, in India, his best record averaged 55 with the bat. New Zealand averaged 36. South Africa averaged 50. Sri Lanka averaged 44, and the West Indies 44. So, really impressive in all conditions apart from maybe England, and also averaged 15 in Bangladesh, but he only played 3 test matches there. Damien, I grew up with so many Indian batters struggling in our conditions. To see him come here and dominate so often, just amazing stuff. And, I remember back at the SCG when, he gave the finger to the crowd. I think that was back in 2010-11 when he was a real youngster. That was the match Michael Clarke made a triple century. And then the series after, the tragic demise of Phil Hughes, he made all those runs. And when Dhoni all of a sudden retired, he took over and was such an impressive leader of India as a captain. And I don't think they've ever really replaced him. He was such a personality in that test side. And I think Australian fans will really miss him.
Yeah, I think so. And look, some people might say that some of his actions in the recent tour of Australia might have left a bit of taste in the mouth of some with the way he went at Constas and the way he went at the crowd. But I don't know. I think that's the theatre of the sport. I think that's what you need in world sport. He certainly had. Look, he's an absolute champion of a player. And don't forget, in terms of that tour of England that you were talking about, I reckon it was 2018 when he was named player of the series. Menners.
That's
Remember,
it. Yeah.
he scored 100 in one of those test matches. That was probably the one time he starred there in England. But look, there was a veneer, and I think for every great cricketer that we've had, the vast majority of them have had a veneer, not necessarily of arrogance about them, but there's a self-confidence about him, isn't there, in the way that he went about playing cricket. And I think he had that mindset of giving it to the opposition within reason. And I think that sort of endears, it can divide people, but it can endear you to the opposition in a way as well. And I think he went about it in a way that, yes, he drew back a lot of criticism, but because of his stature and because of the way he played, there was that mutual respect there as well. I don't know, maybe I'm not necessarily summarising it in the best way, but I think you can understand what I'm saying in that, yes, there was a bit of hostility, but underneath it was an undertone of respect between the two parties when it came to the Australian crowd and Virat Kohli.
Oh, absolutely. I think Australians respect someone that can stand up to us and go toe-to-toe with Australians and give it back to us. And, we've seen, on the other hand, during the 2019 World Cup, when those horrible English crowds were just giving it to Warner and Smith, and Kohli went around to the crowds this was about Sandpapergate, and told them to be more respectful. And so, he is also quite friendly with a lot of the Australian players. We've seen him before games in Australia chatting and laughing with the Australian players. So I think Australians can identify with someone that when they get on the field, you just go as hard as you can. And then when you get off the field, that you leave it behind you. But I also think with Kohli, he's picked the right time to go. Chandresh was saying it's a shame he hasn't got 10,000 test runs, and it is a shame because he's on 9,230. But the way he's going, it could have taken another few years for him to get 10,000 test runs. And, what is not talked about so often because he's such a well-loved figure in India is it has been a dramatic and steep decline at test level for Kohli. And you can't paper over it because in 2019, he averaged 68 in Test cricket. And, the years prior to that were all pretty good from 2012. But then in 2020, he averaged 19 in Test cricket. In 2021, he had averaged 28. In 2022, he averaged 26. In 2023, he averaged 56, so there's an outlier. And then 2024, he averaged 25. 2025 in just one test match, he averaged 11.5. So, that from 2020 to now, it has been a pretty shocking run for him at test level. So no doubt he's picking the right time to go.
And I flagged at the start minutes of this discussion, there's been a lot of comparisons between the pattern of his career and the pattern of Ricky Ponting's career. Remember, Ricky Ponting, maybe bar one outlier in the last few years of his test career, really struggled to make runs on a consistent basis. And I don't know, they're very different players, so I don't want to make the complete comparison between the two of them. But it just goes to show it is hard, even though players are playing, you could argue, at an older age and excelling at an older age these days, although cricket's like that. I think it's one of the less ageist sports, if you like, and that's the beauty of it. But it is hard to maintain your record over a long period of time. Even some of the greats peter out. And, yeah, I think you're right. I think the timing is right. I don't think we expected some of the external noise around this particular week of cricket. But, yeah, when it comes to the test level format, he's probably picked the right time to go. You don't want to stay too long and tarnish your legacy. Not that I don't think his legacy would have been tarnished anyway, but you don't want a situation where it gets a bit muggy between the powers that be and also the individual themselves, because you've got to replenish as a team and you've got to look towards the next generation. So I think he's recognised that. It's a great career. He's still got a lot to offer, I think, in the game of cricket as an ambassador. And, all power to him, really.
Oh, absolutely. And I think as a captain, he's left a huge legacy on India. He took that team to the top. They won their first series in Australia in 2018, 2019, the first Asian team to ever win a series in Australia. So, and an incredible feat just there. But also, his team was ranked number one. He won 40 matches as a Test skipper, which is a very good record. And you consider before that India had struggled overseas. They'd always dominated at home, but they didn't quite have the aura that they have now that Kohli really gave to them. And tremendous leader. As a batter, I was really lucky enough to see Tendulkar bat a lot at the SCG, and Kohli bat a lot. And I still have Tendulkar obviously is a better Test batter than Kohli. It's hard to make an argument otherwise, but behind Tendulkar, I definitely have Kohli, Gavaskar, Dravid, Laxman, Sehwag, all in that group. But still, Tendulkar, he was special with the bat. He was special.
Well, they're two different leaders, aren't they? I think with Tendulkar, he often led by example. He was pretty composed at the crease. He wasn't someone who was into histrionics, and Kohli wasn't necessarily into histrionics either. I know there are exceptions.
I think Tendulkar's captaincy record would be a lot worse than Virat Kohli's. How many? I'm just googling it now. Okay, so he won 25. No, he captained India in 25 matches and just won 4. So yeah, he really struggled.
But I think it's more just his leadership capacity. Even if he wasn't skipper, he was looked upon as a spiritual leader, wasn't he?
Of course, absolutely.
For a long period of time. But he was someone who led by example. Kohli, I think, had a great uncanny ability to really lift his team up and knew that he was going to back them to the hilt, and he wasn't afraid to stand up to the opposition. He had that Arjuna Ranatunga about him to a degree, didn't he? That wasn't maybe as flamboyant as Arjuna necessarily and got into as many incidents, but you knew that he had your back if you were his teammate. And he really stood up for Indian cricket, made them a powerhouse, even not just in terms of the record on the field, but in regards to the way the Indians presented themselves as well, that they weren't going to be toyed with in a mental capacity.
Absolutely. And you made a good point about what happened with Sam Constas. And I think every now and then we saw a Kohli would go a little bit far at international level. The passion would just get to him a little bit much, whether it was the Sam Constas shoulder or in 2017 when Australia toured India, he was accusing Australia of cheating with the DRS system. Sometimes the passion would get to Kohli, but he reminds me a bit of Shane Warne, that every now and then Shane Warne would just get a bit too fired up and tell someone to F off or just go a little bit far. So I think when you look back at Kohli's career, what he did at Constas at the MCG, whilst not being great, I still think adds to the sort of legend of Virat Kohli, that, one of his last acts at Test cricket in Australia was, trying to impose himself on the youngster.
And I didn't agree with it either at the time, but I think he was trying to emphasise the point to his team that they weren't going to be bullied or embarrassed by an 18-year-old or a teenager effectively. So I think it was more a message to his teammates than anything else, even though he probably went about it the wrong way. In terms of favourite moments or one favourite moment, Menas, when it comes to Virat Kohli, look, for me as a Melburnian, that 2022 match against Pakistan, unbelievable in the T20 World Cup, where it came down to the wire and he stood up. King Kohli, they crowned him, and it was when, I think, coming into that particular World Cup, Menas, there were a few question marks even then about the longevity of his career and whether he should step aside. And it signalled maybe a fleeting return to form when he stood up for his team against the arch rival in front of well over 90,000 at the MCG. One of the great cricket memories anywhere around the world this century so far.
Yeah, I think that's a great memory. And I guess those sort of memories are at stake, because if India refuses to play Pakistan again in international cricket, the ICC is going to be in a real pickle about what to do about these world events. All right. Farewell, Virat Kohli. I said to Chandresh, and I think this is what should happen. I think Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli need to retire from the 50-over game now. the Indian team should just look to the future and prepare for the next World Cup. So I know India loves to give big farewells, so they need to schedule a 50-over series of 3 games against an opponent. Sharma and Kohli get 3 games where the crowds can say farewell to them, and then they retire as soon as possible. Because I actually think now, if they stay on in the 50-over team, they're holding it back, because in 2027 there's going to be another World Cup. I don't think Kohli and Sharma will be there. So just put the feet up now, boys. Play some T20 cricket and let the youngsters take it from here. All right.
Do you think it's inevitable that it will happen pretty shortly, given the fact that, as we've seen, he's retired from the Test format now, that the 50-over format will follow suit?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it'll be far behind, but I think the BCCI will want a farewell series because it would generate huge buzz if you could say we're going to play 3 games with Sharma and Kohli before they retire. So I think that'll happen pretty soon. So as soon as the IPL is over, I think you'll hear something about that. All right. Other news. Both Australia and South Africa have announced their World Test Championship final squads. So let's start with Australia. No surprises. We talked about maybe a bolter like Marcus Harris or someone getting into the squad. That hasn't happened. So it's all the usual suspects are there. I guess the real surprise is Brendan Doggett is the travelling reserve. So they've named 16-player squad for the World Test Championship final and then the 3-test tour of the West Indies. The World Test Championship squad can only be 15 players, so Doggett's just outside of that. But no surprises. Matt Kuhneman is the second spinner. Josh Inglis retains his spot. Sam Constas is in the squad. Yeah, no surprises from the last test squad. But I guess some comments from George Bailey were quite interesting when they released this. He said that they're really viewing the World Test Championship final as a one-off game and then the West Indies series to be something different. And they were sort of talking about Sam Constas. So I'm getting the feeling that they could put Sam Constas in the team for the West Indies tour and say, here's 3 test matches, get used to test cricket. But when it comes to the World Test Championship final, I think they just want to take a shrewd, ruthless approach that this is one game to win the title, and they're not sure who's going to open the batting yet. And Bailey floated some options like, obviously, Sam Constas could still do it, but he also said Josh Inglis or Marnus Labuschagne could open the batting, and Marnus Labuschagne had been mooted as the opener for a while. And I guess, Damien, the squeeze is on now. Cameron Green's back. They might want to fit him in the middle order. And where does Marnus go? So Marnus might not have a choice now. They might just say, look, you either give opening a go with Uzi or hit the road.
It's an interesting one with Cam Green, though, because he's going to be a pure batter only, I think, until the Ashes, because they want to try and condition him back into Test cricket. I don't think he's going to be doing a heck of a lot of bowling, if at all, until the Ashes. So does that maybe have an impact as well, in the sense that he's going to be a specialist batsman most likely during this period of time? Does that mean Bo Webster potentially could retain his spot as well, over the next 6 months? I know that they really are honing in on Cam Green and wanting him to develop, but he is still restricted in his output to a degree. I know he's got experience. I know there's a lot of promise about him. It'd be interesting to see what happens there, whether there's any change over the next 6 months, given he's going to be restricted to just batting, probably, most likely.
Yeah, look, I think it's good for Webster that Green can't bowl, because I think they'll want that bowling option. But for Cam Green, I mean, he was batting at 4 before he got injured, so they see him as a top order player. It's just I wonder whether they want to just slot him straight back into 4. He made that 100 in county cricket, hasn't done much since. But if they do want to slot him back in, then it could be a bit of a squeeze on where Labuschagne goes. I don't mind the option of Josh Inglis opening, because he'd take on the bowling, and Usman Khawaja is quite conservative. Khawaja and Labuschagne, if they bat through the first session, Australia could barely get into double figures.
With the way things have been going recently. Yeah, I don't mind that shout in terms of Inglis and Khawaja opening, because they do somewhat complement each other in a way, in that they're very different players, and I think that can help. We know Khawaja, it'll be interesting to see how he performs, Usman Khawaja, given the controversies of the last few months. And look, he's proven himself before at this level in this very match a couple of years ago. So that'll be on his mind potentially, and maybe we'll give him a bit of confidence. But I don't mind that Inglis Khawaja idea because they are somewhat very different players and in a way can complement each other. So that always leaves a bit of variety for the South Africans to think about, and it just adds that extra dimension of complexity for them. So I don't mind that. You're right about Labuschagne and Khawaja. They're very, very similar batsmen. So, yeah, I don't mind your shout there.
So we'll see what happens with that. I mean, I'm a big Constas fan, but I also do accept that he's a little bit of an unknown quantity. He's still finding his feet at test level. Do you want someone finding their feet at test level in a World Test Championship final? I think if they wanted to play him at Lords, and people can go back to the tape, I pissed and moaned about it during the Sri Lankan series. They should have played him in Sri Lanka. I think they've made a bit of a bed that they have to sleep in now, that they could just drop him back in there for this big game against Rabada and co. Could be quite difficult. So, so the other thing was, look, there's no real debate about the team for Australia apart from that sort of spot, what they do with Green and the opening spot, etc. But with the bowling, I mean, you would imagine Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins, and Lyon would be the attack unless there's an injury. But I was tuning into SEN radio in Melbourne yesterday, and I've never heard such Victorian bias in my whole life. Gerard Whateley and Damien Fleming, I don't know if like Victorian cricket was standing behind them with a gun or something. But they were saying that they thought by the end of summer, Boland had overtaken Josh Hazlewood as the third quick in Australia. And I'm just like, I don't know what planet you're living in. Boland is a great bowler, but there's no way he's overtaken Josh Hazlewood as a test bowler. He's very good. He's an A triple plus replacement, Boland, but that was some fine Victorian bias.
Now, I'm with you, and even though I'm a Victorian, I'm not suggesting they're biased, but I disagree with the notion that Boland has overtaken Hazlewood, given what Hazlewood has produced, and also what's to come. I know Boland, look, he's aged well. There's no doubt about that. Over time, he's still quite a fit man. I think it really does come down from the way the selection pattern has been, Menners. The selectors seem to think that he is suited to certain types of conditions, Scott Boland. I think Hazlewood has a greater variety in terms of what he can produce on various wickets and in various conditions as well, whereas I think they see, whether we agree with it or not, I think the selectors see Boland to be a specialist in certain conditions that suit him.
Absolutely. And Boland is a great player. If someone gets injured and can't play, then you should absolutely give him a crack. But Josh Hazlewood has 279 test wickets at 24.57, and he's done it over 72 tests. And we were debating whether he's Australia's best all-format bowler. Scott Boland's record's not bad, 56 wickets at 17.66. So he's certainly got a good case there, Boland, but there's no way he can sustain it. So anyway, that made me laugh when Flemo and Gerard were saying that maybe Boland had overtaken Hazlewood. I do not think that would be how the selectors or Cummins feels. So that's it for the Australian squad. Go on.
It's not like New South Welsh people are biased, Menners. Never been biased before in my life. So the big, I guess, run in now is who can knock the door down. If you're Cameron Green, make county hundreds. If you're Marnus Labuschagne, who's going to Glamorgan, make some runs. Show them that you're in form. So that's what sort of is going to be interesting and leading up to that final that starts in June 11. It's not long away, the World Test Championship final. I'm looking forward to staying up all night, every night, watching it and then doing a live show afterwards. So that's going to be fun. You're going to join me at 4 a.m.? I hope it's not going to rain, Menners. That's the thing I fear when it comes to UK summers. Imagine if it rains. I know they've got a spare day, don't they, for it, if required. But yeah, imagine if it rains for bloody 3 out of the 5 or 6 days that they've allocated for it. It'd be boring as batshit type of situation.
Yeah. And you'll be joining me at 4 a.m. for these live recaps of the day's play?
I can on certain days, I reckon. We'll see how we go.
Just pulling
Well,
your legs.
you've stayed up for me. You've stayed up for me, Meadows, over the journey. So yeah, we'll see how we go. It's a shame it's 4 a.m. though. It'd be better if it was 1 a.m. because I'm a night owl, not an early riser.
Same. So with this, South Africa have named their World Test Championship squad. Look, no real surprises there. The real shame is Norkie is injured, so he's not available. But Bavuma is the captain, and I'm really looking forward to seeing, Rickleton play. Obviously, Rabada, Aiden Markram, Lungi Nagidi, Marco Janssen. So some really handy cricketers there for South Africa. But no, Norkia is a big exclusion for them. Also, an interesting article by Robert Craddock about the World Test Championship final last week that, it's only going to be on Amazon Prime because they have the deal to televise these ICC finals, and the World Test Championship is a final. And because the World Test Championship final is not on an anti-siphoning list, the Amazon Prime don't have to offer it to a local network. So at the moment, Channel 7, I think, have been trying to get the rights to broadcast it on free-to-air, but at this stage, they've had no success. So it would seem like the World Test Championship final is only on Prime, which would be a shame because the last World Test Championship final in 2023 against India generated quite a bit of buzz here because it was on Channel 7.
Correct, it was, and it was in the lead up to an Ashes series as well, but it was in perfect prime time, wasn't it, Menas, in terms of the first session, drew big audiences. So you're right. I think it comes down to the landscape at the moment, unfortunately. I mean, free-to-air television networks have to cut costs, and look, we saw Channel 7 finally get the rights to the Sri Lankan series because it was at a perfect ratings time, but I don't know, the Test series was a little bit underwhelming given how one-sided it was, but I think this would be a bit of a different spectacle. It doesn't happen very often. I think it just comes down to money, the bottom line, whether Channel 7 are going to pay enough to try and secede to the demands of the streamers and the various bodies like the ICC. And, the fact is a lot of them are going through Nine's the same, going through cost cutting at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing to consider is Amazon have paid a lot of money for these cricket rights. This is a big game. This would be the sort of thing you might gain a few more eyeballs and might actually sign up to the package to watch it. And therefore, with the competitive streaming marketplace, if you're Amazon, you're thinking, why would we pay for these rights if we're not going to show them exclusively?
Do you think this is going to be the first big test, Menas? I know Amazon televised the World Cup, the T20 World Cup in the middle of last year. It was at a very bad time slot for Australians because it was literally overnight, wasn't it? Most of the matches were in that, 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. block, Australian time, Australian Eastern time, which is the worst possible block. And it was in the US and things like that. So I don't know if it's a greatest platform to really put a measurement on whether the streaming providers can make an impact in Australia. Is this going to be the first big test as to whether Amazon can make an impact?
Well, I think they've failed pretty much all the tests they've had so far. The women's team didn't do them much help either. Not having a good T20 World Cup last.
No, they were bundled out in the semis, but up until was it the semis? The semis, yeah. They were still going pretty well before then. But again, the time zone didn't help because it was on right in the middle of the night.
Yeah, look, it'll be really interesting to see how many people tune into it. As I said, I think it's hard for some people to get used to watching sport on Amazon. I sometimes forget that the cricket's on Amazon and we'll go to another platform and then go, actually, God, it's not here. It's on Amazon. But I'm, lucky I've got Amazon, so I won't miss out. All right, we're going to take our final break. Then we'll be back. A couple of bits of cricket news and then can't let it go. You are listening to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I'm Manners. I'm with Damien Watson. It is Wednesday, the 14th of May. Recording this from Sydney. Damien is in Melbourne. And a couple of bits of news. So before we get to Can't Let It Go, Damien, Matthew Mott, the former Australian women's team coach, has been signed as the Sydney Sixers WBBL coach. He'll also be assistant coach for the men's Sydney Sixers team. But this is a fantastic role for Matthew Mott. Obviously had a pretty difficult stint as the English white ball coach for a while there, but then has now left that position. And I think this is a coup for the WBBL. He's one of the most accomplished coaches in the world. And the Sydney Sixers have really struggled. They haven't won the WBBL since 2017, 2018. They've had some absolute stinkers of seasons since then. They've really fallen off a cliff. They used to be one of the most dominant teams in the competition, but they just haven't been able to hold it together. So he's got a big job ahead of him. Obviously worked with a lot of players before that are in that team when he was the coach of Australia. But I think this is what the competition needs, these kind of high-profile coaches that are recognisable faces.
Agreed, and I think takes over from Charlotte Edwards, who's a recognisable figure, Menas, as far as English cricket is concerned. And she's obviously now got her chance in terms of the hierarchy of English cricket, and deservedly so, has a good reputation. But as does Matthew Mott, as you said, and I think it's a great coup for the WBBL as well. He's, you could argue, been made the scapegoat, I think. Do you think he was a bit unfairly treated? I know it's a little bit different, but was he... I don't know, that's just the vibe I got from a lot of people, that he was made the scapegoat a little bit for England's white ball form.
Oh, absolutely. He was mistreated and he was definitely made the scapegoat. That team was on the slide and he was blamed for it. It's a bit, the Poms love getting into our coaches. You know, it's like poor Ange, who's coach of Tottenham Hotspur in the English Premier League. They're just desperate to sack him, even though he could lift a title. So, yeah, that's the English media for you. They'll never give an Aussie an even break, that's for sure.
You're right about the Sydney Sixers, though, and they've had a fair bit of talent still in their lists in most seasons during that period since 2017, Menas. I mean, Elise Perry's been there for a fair chunk of time. They've had Elisa Healy. I know they made the final, didn't they, in early 2019 off the back of a very tight, very memorable semi-final when they got through the Super Over. But yeah, you're right. There's been times where they've struggled a little bit despite having a fair bit of talent, and also young talent coming through on their list. So maybe they just need that change of direction to get them together in the gel.
Absolutely. So great to see Matthew Mott back. And last bit of news, sad news, Australia lost Bob Cowper, former Test cricketer, passed away at the age of 81, I think he was. Better check that. Yep. 84, sorry, 84.
84.
Only 3 off. But I remember hearing a lot about him because my cricket coach was one of the bowlers that bowled to him when he made his 300 at the MCG. And actually, my coach, Barry Knight, ended up, I think, dismissing Bob Cowper after he's got past his 300 caught and bowled. But, you know, I think his career really does highlight the difference between eras. 27 test matches, 2,061 runs, an average of 47, 500s, 1050s. Add to that 36 test wickets at an average of 32. But because they weren't paid enough, he just retired. He pulled the pin on his career at the age of 28. And when you think about that record, he could have been anything if he'd played on a little while longer. So it just shows how little they were paid. And he went on to make a fortune as a stockbroker and a merchant banker. And I think Robert Craddock was saying on the radio the other day that he was worth $100 million in the 80s. So,
you know, he boomed from that period of economic flourishment, didn't he, before the stock market crash, but had a very successful business career. That wasn't overly uncommon necessarily back then in most sports around the world, Menas, either. It was the same in various football codes too, where players would leave established clubs to go into the country areas because they received more money and they retired very prematurely. And in this case, as you said, with Bob Cowper, concentrated on his business career because it just wasn't financially feasible, particularly in cricket. I mean, it's a little bit different in footy and domestic codes where, you know, you can balance the two reasonably well because it's all localised. With cricketers back then, they had to tour a lot. Bill Laurie always told the stories of having to tour and, you know, he was struggling financially as well, trying to raise 2 kids. He couldn't really maintain a job because half the time you were away touring overseas and you were getting barely anything. So you can understand, particularly with cricketers, why a lot of them, and he wasn't the only one, retired early to forge a career in business. And I don't know, do you reckon, I don't know if he ever really spoke about it all that much, whether he thinks, you know, what might have been in that situation and maybe if he was born in a different era. I often wonder how cricketers of that era feel about the money that's in the game today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, anyway, Barry Knight, my coach, bowled him for 307. He said he bowled to him. All right, so that is the all the cricket news on Cricket Unfiltered. It's just can't let it go. Before we get to can't let it go, just a couple of quick questions. Martin Lawrence has asked. Oh, he said that he doesn't know if he would be comfortable if they were a player or a coach going back to the IPL. Martin, what if I said $1 million will hit your bank account if you went back? And you were going to be in a part of India where you were thousands of kilometers away from the action. Don't worry about it. I think you might go. And Path has asked, will Josh Butler miss the playoffs in the IPL? And I think the England players are going to be pulled out before the playoffs. But again, and it's a bit like Cricket South Africa, the BCCI is going to be strong arming all the other boards as much as possible. So we'll see what happens. All right, now it is can't let it go. That little bit of cricket news you just can't let go through to the keeper. I'll let my friend Damien Watson go first. He's frozen.
All right, just a couple of women's ones first. Menners, Heather Graham is going to return to Western Australia, obviously coming from Tasmania, where she started that three-peat of the WNCL. She was a domestic player of the year with WA and the Perth Scorchers, I think, going back about 5 or 6 years ago now, 6 or 7 years ago now. And Ebony Hoskin has also been lured there as well over there, the Perth Scorchers, with a 2-year extension after a breakout first summer for the club last season, so they're looking pretty strong over there in WA. And also, there's a nice one here, Menners. You used to be a correspondent with me on radio, on SEM radio back in the day, particularly during COVID times. And one of the regular listeners who was a fan of yours during that time, Margaret from Sunbury, she celebrated her 95th birthday yesterday, and she loves her cricket and was a big fan of the segment. So just passing on her wishes to you as well, because I know she used to listen and love the segment that you used to do very late at night.
Happy birthday, Margaret. You'll have to send her Cricket Unfiltered. We get her into the podcast. She'll never get enough.
Get her one of those shirts, Metters.
That's it. All right, my can't let it go. It's not quite as wholesome as Damien's, but Josh Hazelwood was caught up in a scandal where there was a fake social media account started. Now, this is hilarious. To anyone that knows Hazelwood, I don't even think he could tell you what social media was, let alone, how to start up an account or anything. I think when I spoke to him, he called WhatsApp social media. And I don't think WhatsApp is necessarily social media. It's a messaging app. So someone started a fake account, and this is what they tweeted out. And this is very funny because, well, it's a serious situation, and I wouldn't want to be Josh Hazelwood in this situation. But I think these lines are very funny. That Josh Hazelwood tweeted this out. Know that your fight is not just for India, but for the hope of a safer world. We Aussies admire your resilience, and I'm cheering for you, not just as a cricketer, but as someone who believes in the power of standing up for what's right. And that was a fake Josh Hazelwood account, which was taken down pretty quickly. But yeah, very funny that he would go, that someone would start an account for him supporting India in their military action against Pakistan. Got to be careful if you're on social media. You got to be careful.
There's so many fake accounts out there as well, isn't there? Jeez.
I've heard everybody's scared to say stuff about the IPL, the BCCI. Everyone's very cautious of not upsetting everybody because so many people livelihoods are dependent on the revenue from that competition, not just players, but coaches, broadcasters. And, we were talking about it before, but the reality is the way it works in India is if you piss off the wrong person, you can find yourself on the outer very, very quickly. And so you've got to be very careful. I was listening to the great cricketers on Pete and Gideon's podcast, and they were saying that, they did some shows in India and they were warned after them that maybe you should tone the jokes down a little bit. And clearly they're obviously about Indian cricket or the BCCI. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful on social media, and you got to be careful what you say. So it doesn't help when people are starting fake accounts for you and spreading lies and misinformation. Anyway,
You're unfiltered though, Menners. You don't have to worry. You're not tired or have any skin in the game with anyone, really. So
no, I've had some Menners burners though. I've had people start accounts on Twitter under my name before.
The Pommies, I'm guessing.
I don't know who they were, but didn't work out so well. All right, that is it for this edition of Cricket Unfiltered. Great news, listeners. You're going to get another episode this week because I'm interviewing and this is, don't tell the guest, but I am trying to just calm the waters a bit with the English press pack before they come here because, I did drop a nuke during the last Ashes. Just trying to get a few on side. So if it goes ugly next summer, I've at least got a few English journos that don't want to kill me. So I'm having Tim Wigmore on, who's written a fantastic book about the history of Test cricket, and that'll be released in a few days. So stay tuned for that. I'm also going to get him to help an early preview for the Ashes. So that should be great, and looking forward to having that one. Damien, what's up for you? Where can the listeners catch you over the next week?
At Damo_Watts on Twitter, and also I'm commentating VFL again, I think, this week. So looking forward to that if you like your Aussie rules footy. What about you, Menners? I noticed you've been tweeting a bit of AFL actually lately, saying that there should be just 3 periods instead of 4 quarters.
Yep, that's my hot AFL take. I enjoyed the game I went to a couple of weeks ago, but they're way too long. They're like you're 2.5 hours at the ground. It's too much.
That's less than a T20 game still, Menners.
Yeah, I know, but football's not nearly as interesting as a T20 game. Anyway, tune in to Damien doing the VFL. I'm sure he's amazing at it. Thanks for tuning in to Cricket Unfiltered, and we'll be back soon.